Westfield, New Jersey, November 1971. From the outside, it looked like the American dream. A towering Victorian mansion, pristine lawn, flags on the porch, classical music echoing faintly through the stained glass windows. Inside, it was silent. The kind of silence that's too perfect, because everyone inside was dead. For nearly a month, no one knew, until a neighbor noticed something odd. The lights were on, but the windows were blackened. The mail was piling up, and the once active house felt like a tomb. When police entered the home, they discovered 5 bodies, a mother, a wife, and 3 children, each placed carefully, almost reverently. Upstairs, the organ was still playing. A note had been left behind. And the killer? He was gone. No trace, no sound, just a single man who had wiped out his entire bloodline and vanished. This is the story of John List, a man who planned everything and believed he was doing God's work. This is the mind of a killer. John List was born in 1925 in Bay City, Michigan, into a world shaped by war, discipline, and religious doctrine. His upbringing was cold. His father, an authoritarian figure, ruled the home with strict Lutheran values and demanded obedience above all. Emotions were weaknesses. Compassion was rare. John was an only child, isolated, withdrawn, and taught to fear both failure and God. As he grew older, he clung to the few constants he knew: order, faith, and rules. He served in World War II, earning a Bronze Star, and later used the GI Bill to earn a degree in business. He married Helen Taylor, a widow with a young daughter, and tried to build the perfect nuclear family. But beneath the surface, he was rigid, emotionally distant, and incapable of coping with failure. Appearances were everything to John. Losing status or respectability was, to him, worse than death. When he lost his job, he didn't seek help. He hid it. To admit defeat would be to invite shame. And in John List's world, shame was a mortal sin. By the fall of 1971, the facade was crumbling. List had been unemployed for months, silently fired from his job at a bank for poor performance. But every morning he put on a suit, packed a briefcase, and left the house, only to sit at the train station, reading and wasting hours, pretending to work. Bills stacked up. The mortgage went unpaid. The family was living on borrowed time and borrowed money. But John never told them. Inside the mansion, things were no better. Helen had become an alcoholic, battling long-term illness and slipping into deep depression. She mocked his faith, resented their life, and grew more dependent with each passing day. Their daughter Patricia was exploring acting and witchcraft, both of which John viewed as ungodly. His sons were growing into young men he no longer recognized. He felt abandoned by the world, by God, and by his own family. He feared the collapse of the American ideal. Welfare to him was worse than death, a stain on his family name. He would later say that he couldn't bear the shame, and in that isolation, a terrifying idea took root. If he couldn't save his family in life, perhaps he could save them in death. To John, the idea made sense. He would remove them from a world of sin and pain, send their souls to heaven, and when his work was done, he would vanish like a ghost. November 9th, 1971. It was just another Tuesday. The sun rose on a quiet neighborhood. But John List had already made up his mind. He had planned every detail. He wrote a 5-page confession letter to his pastor, explaining that he was saving his family's souls. He called the children's schools to report them sick. He canceled deliveries. He cut himself out of every photograph in the house, erasing his face from their history. He set up the home's intercom system to play classical organ music continuously through the house. He turned down the heat to slow decomposition. Then, He loaded his 9mm handgun. Helen was first. She sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee. John raised the gun and pulled the trigger. His mother was next, in her upstairs bedroom. She asked about a noise. He told her not to worry, then shot her in the eye. He waited for Patricia and Frederick to come home from school. Each child walked through the front door, unaware of what had happened inside. Each met the same fate. Finally, his oldest son, John Jr., arrived. He fought back. He struggled. And it took more than one bullet to end his life. It was not rage. It was methodical, calculated, cold. Afterward, John arranged 4 of the bodies in the mansion's grand ballroom on sleeping bags. He played soft organ music. He turned on the lights. He set timers to turn lights on and off at scheduled intervals. And he walked away. Police would later describe it as the most perfectly executed family annihilation they'd ever seen. There was no blood trail, no sign of a getaway. His car was found at JFK Airport, but there were no flight records under his name. The mansion stood as a haunting tomb. Days turned into weeks. Only after neighbors noticed the lights burning day and night behind drawn curtains did police enter. Inside, silence. The air was stale. The bodies had begun to decompose, but there was no sign of the man who had done it. What no one knew was that John List had taken a bus to Denver. There, under the name Robert P. Clark, he began again. He joined a Lutheran church, worked as an accountant, married again, built a quiet life. For 18 years, he lived undisturbed, a phantom hiding in plain sight. And no one, not even his new wife, knew who he really was. He taught Sunday school. He preached morality. He lived among the faithful. And never once mentioned the family he left behind. In 1989, America's Most Wanted aired an episode about the List murders. They featured a forensic bust created by artist Frank Bender, showing what John List might look like nearly 2 decades later. The bust was remarkably lifelike, complete with receding hairline, wrinkles, and even the exact type of glasses List was known to wear. The next day, a woman in Denver called the police. She recognized the face. John List was arrested at work, calm, polite, composed. When they read him his rights, he said, "I knew this would happen. I knew this day would come." In custody, he admitted everything, but never once apologized, never showed remorse. He told the court that he couldn't face the shame of bankruptcy and couldn't leave his family to suffer. So he chose to end their lives and start his over. What makes John List so terrifying isn't just the crime. It's the absence of passion. He didn't kill in anger. He killed with conviction. A deeply religious man, he believed his family had strayed too far. He believed that if they died now, he could guide their souls to salvation. To him, it wasn't murder. It was a spiritual rescue mission. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms in prison. A psychiatrist diagnosed him with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, but he was deemed legally sane. He never showed emotion during the trial, never said he was sorry. He died behind bars in 2008, and the mansion where it happened, it mysteriously burned down years after the murders. The only thing that remains is the story. A story of control, faith, delusion, and one man's need to be both executioner and savior. The case would later inspire the horror film The Stepfather, cementing its place in pop culture. John List erased his past and built a new life. But the next killer? He didn't want to disappear. He wanted to be remembered forever. He believed his crimes were a message, a philosophy, a war against modern society. Next week, we step inside the mind of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, a man who turned isolation into ideology and bombs into beliefs.